Hello and welcome back to Elden Ring and a new tier list video. With the patch 1.08 updating a lot of things poise-wise, but more than most, dex weapons were both buffed and nerfed a lot in this patch. Things like reducing the poise of a variety of dex weapon types, such as heavy thrusting swords and thrusting weapons in general being affected most of all. On the other hand, smaller weapons like the fists, claws and daggers were given such major love that I've been really impressed by them, as well as other weapons in the dex type such as reapers and twin blades. This has made me weigh up the situation with the dex tier list, as well as adding a few that really should have been there based on your guys' feedback. This is the tier list as always though. S, A, B and C are our tier list categories. This is the best of the best compared to one another though, so if it is on the list, even if it's C tier, it's a very good dex weapon. Starting with what I think might be controversial, because this patch, scythes were made better, and yet I am placing them lower than before. That is because contextually, things have changed this patch for dex, and I have found a bunch of weapon types are better, and I feel scythes, having used them in this patch, just don't compete. That doesn't mean they're bad, they can cause bleed, you can run them two-handed or in power stance, and this patch they've been improved. Some of their attacks have got better speed, as well as the recovery being better. So why have they gone down? Because out of all of them, I think it's benefited from that buff the least. I still feel like its damage, maybe it's from its AR scaling, it just feels low for what it is. It's not a fast enough weapon to consistently get those bleeds off, and it doesn't hit hard enough. The moveset is bland and boring, and I just find it hard to make work. I don't enjoy using this weapon type, even though it's been buffed this patch. So I don't think it can be anywhere but a C. Much like the bigger, heavier hitting Zammer curved swords, which were previously improved in 1.07 to have increased attack power and having attack power on the weapon part, meaning when you hit at melee range, it deals more damage. As a curved greatsword, it's had minor buffs in past patches as well, but as a heavier, slower dex weapon, it just doesn't seem to hit the same oomph that I'm looking for, like many of the weapons we're talking about today do. Weapons on this list can absolutely steamroll and carry in both PvE and PvP, and this weapon is just fine, it's good, solid, and it deserves to be on this tier list. But I think even a B tier is overrating it. Maybe it's the fact that Frost just isn't a great status. Maybe it's the fact that when power stanced, it loses its unique moveset. It's definitely better in PvE than it is PvP as well. So I have too many negatives that I can say about it to put it any higher. Let's jump up to the B tier where things are going to get filled, that's for sure, and also interesting, starting with the fist weapons, which are actually legitimately good this patch. They have increased the speed of some of the attacks and its recovery, much like the scythes, but that's making a major difference when it comes to fist weapons. It means you're actually landing your attacks and you're getting big burst off. Those bleed procs are going to occur with the right fist weapons, and you can really put out some solid, respectable DPS. I'm actually really enjoying using them. Their output, their DPS is impressive now. They're a lot more viable of a weapon, but why are they B tier if I'm singing the praise so much? Well, that's because of the other two weapons we're going to talk about. We'll get to that when we reach A tier. Contextually though, this is a B for me. What about another weapon type that was called out this patch with a buff, that being twin blades? I'm putting them into B tier. When two-handed, so not power stance like they commonly are, they are now faster and again have that reduced recovery, making them actually much more viable as a weapon, and actually, in fact, in two-hand, relevant, because they were seriously overshadowed by running two, especially buffed up or bleed-based, and doing like the jumping power stance twin blades attack, which gets many attacks out at once. This feels a lot more viable. While it won't compete with that ridiculous burst of the power stance twin blades, in PvP it feels good now, especially the bleed options you can run. The running attacks are incredible. The standing trading, also great with those long combos. The speed has made a real difference there, and that'll have increased its DPS in general in PvE as well. I'm happy to see twin blades being used in two-hand, kind of like they're supposed to be now. Now we should talk about two thrusting weapons, starting with the S-Stock, which should have been on my last tier list, as many of you fairly brought up in the comments. This is a bland and simple weapon that works stupidly well. A thrust moveset only really does one thing right, but it does it well. And I see this weapon often in duels and free-for-alls, in unison most often with another weapon, brought out to surprise the opponent with its quick and fast damage. However, that's often tied to its counter-attack damage, and that damage damage was specifically nerfed this patch. A major part of the weapon's kit has been made weaker, and you feel it. Not to mention also the poise damage reduction to this weapon type on top isn't great. I think it deserves this, well, overdue acknowledgement, but because it's been nerfed, I think it shouldn't be an A. I think a B tier is more fair, but it's still a very good weapon to run in your builds, especially for that surprise purpose. Much like the other rapier type that I'm speaking about here, we have the Antspur rapier. Nerfed in the same way, counterattack damage reduced, and that lower poise this patch. It's a weapon that works almost the same. You could power stance them though, run them solo, have it in the offhand, use it for different purposes, but basically the same purposes as the S-Stock. This has the added benefit of Scarlet Rot though, which will build damage over time after it procs, great in combination with other damage over time effects like poison, but it works well on its own. Compared to the S-Stock, it'll deal less damage to gain that benefit, but it can be well worth running with that in mind all the same. Even though these have been nerfed this patch in these two ways, it feels wrong to put it down in a C. They still feel strong and serve a valid purpose, so B grade is right to me. Next up in B tier is a weapon that has been harshly nerfed this patch. I don't know why specifically. I never thought it was that overpowered. This of course being the Dragon King Cragblade here. They reduced the speed of this heavy thrusting sword's crouch attacks, reduced the stagger caused by double-handed jumping attacks, and reduced the poise damage of its weapon art. Not to mention, this falls under the counterattack thrust weapon damage reduction, so it's been nerfed in 4 ways this patch. I still rate it pretty good and I see it pretty often still, but it is weaker on pretty much all sides. Did someone know something I didn't? I thought it was a good weapon, but not broken. To see it nerfed in 4 different ways, it's pretty crazy. Still good, but yeah, B tier from A tier, unfortunately. Next up, we have another weapon that has been nerfed. This is the Dragon Scale Blade, which we added to the list last time. One of the coolest weapons in the entire game. It's an ice lightning based katana, and I really like this one, especially with how it was so weak for so long, and then they finally buffed it. It's actually been nerfed slightly in this patch because it falls under the katana category of weapon, and that poise damage has been reduced for that weapon type. Not a major nerf though, not that relevant, still worthy of its B tier. This weapon can deal physical damage, lightning damage, and frost build up all at once, and it has a longer buff on its weapon itself. I find it really cool and fun to use. I do not think it's that busted or overpowered, but I just think the fact that it's so cool and unique, I'm happy to see it anytime I see it. Much like the Coil Shield, yes, the shield is still here, as an incredible dex weapon, due to mainly, yes, its Ash of War, the Viper's Bite, dealing that deadly poison build-up, comparable to the damage of Scarlet Rot. The range is impressive, consistently landing in PvP. Even when someone rolls it, it'll apply the poison, which is pretty gnarly. But there you go, Elden Ring netcode. I actually saw this today while recording some of these videos. I'm happy to see it's still a popular pick for applying poison, especially since the buff in 1.07. That poison dealing more damage now, and in general, it's a much more viable weapon. But with no changes to speak of, it stays at a B rating. The final B tier weapon here, though, is the Vulgar Militia Saw, which, like I said last time, with the nerf to Seppuku, I bring them to the bottom of B, and they're still here, just holding on. Basically, you can burst people down. It has a sort of halberd moveset. It's kind of unique for what it does, but it's basically a bleed stick. Where that's relevant, which is most of the game, whether that's PvE or PvP, it's strong, and that's why it's here. But it's pretty bland, not that exciting, so I can't put it higher. But now we will move to the A tier situation, and this is where, again, it gets really interesting. I am now putting in A tier daggers in general, thanks to the simple but incredibly effective buff of increased speed and distance of your attacks, as well as better recovery, which is phenomenal. Daggers were painfully irritating. In PvP, man, you just cannot land blows with these things. The simple improvement to its hitbox to make its distance of the attacks better means I am more consistently landing my attacks. The speed is outrageous though. You can burst bosses down thanks to the many multi-hits. Whether you're buffing them up with different element types or just going hardcore into Occult and Bleed, you will absolutely destroy in PvE with these things. But it's the same in PvP. If you can standing trade and just get many attacks off, which are incredibly quick this patch, you're going to bleed burst pretty much anyone down. The running attacks are incredible. If someone's rolling around you in a circle and you're spamming attacks, it's so punishing. I've had an absolute blast using a variety of daggers this patch. So of course, yeah, in the arcane tier list, Reduvia is going to be doing incredible. They're fantastic, as are the other weapon type we were referencing earlier, also improved this patch, the claws. Where they have not had a range improvement, you can get away with it with the Raptor Claws specifically because they're longer and have higher range by default. They're buffed in another way though. So you've got the speed improvement and the recovery improvement, but you also have increased poise damage on claws specifically, which means these are arguably better to use in PvP than daggers because you're able to trade more consistently. They're both phenomenal picks though, and I guess if I had to say it, daggers is probably better in PvE because you can get higher burst based on the testing I've done. The full dagger combo comes out just as quick but deals more damage because you get more hits out, where the claws with that poise improvement feel a bit better in PvP. They're both incredibly viable, but more than that, they're meta relevant. I am seeing them very often and I really enjoy playing them. Unlike the next weapon, the Cross Naginatas, which I bring down to an A tier. They're no longer S tier because, yeah, the seppuku nerf from the previous patch really hurt these. They were basically seppuku sticks with that thrusting long-range moveset. It worked incredibly. One of the strongest things you can pull out in PvP for a long time. These days, seppuku is a lot more expensive on your health and just isn't as efficient, doesn't give you as much attack power, not as much bleed buildup, but it was still good. But unfortunately, this weapon, being very thrusting, is tied a lot to counter damage using thrusting. That being nerfed this patch means that it's just taken too many hits to stay in S tier, in my opinion. A is very good though, obviously, but they've been multiple times reduced in power. Alright, so there's been a few changes to the weapons we're talking about for the rest of A tier. Bolt of Gransax, still a phenomenal thrusting spear weapon that gives you that red lightning to snipe people. That works amazing in the arena because you can do it from out of line of sight, and the lightning just goes so quick and deals so much damage. The weapons themselves, single or power stance used, you can deal so much poke and thrust damage. Now obviously that's been nerfed this patch, but it's not as effective or damning because it has other options compared to, say, the S stock, which is all about that. It holds on to its A tier because of that. I love these weapons, but if not for that, I might have even considered bumping it up to an S tier because of how effective it is in the arena. The Guardian Swordspears, on the other hand, they're spears, right, but they're not really thrusting based, so they're not negatively affected so much by those changes. It kind of survives them. With its more vertical moveset, I really like these. It's got really high AR for dex weapons. You can run them solo in two-hand or in power stance and it will change the moveset. It's really effective. And also, these types of weapons, they can run some fantastic, very unique Ashes of War like the Phantom Slash, which you rarely see. And it remains one of my favorite dex weapons. Lastly, for A tier, we have two katanas. Firstly, the Uchikatanas, which are the shorter range, kind of universal weapons. You can run them in bleed, you can run them high dex, you can put a bunch of great Ashes of War on them, they can be seppuku sticks if you want them to be. They're good all around, and they're outclassed by another weapon that does the exact same thing, so it can't be higher than A tier. Much like the final A tier pick, Hand of Malenia, the boss weapon, it is awesome. The Ash of War, Waterfall Dance, can be used for a lot of reasons. The successive hits that are insane on this thing, you can really skyrocket the AR. I find it a fun weapon to use, and pulling it out in a surprise situation in PvP can work well, especially in the arena and free-for-all. But it's got lower scaling than, say, other katanas. Both the Uchigatana and Hand of Malenia, being katanas, have less poise damage this patch. Not really that negative, but a noticeable hit. But I would say, based on its scaling, it'd probably be a B tier, but its Ash of War, being uniquely awesome and with high potential in both PvE and PvP, keeps it at its A tier. And with that, I almost forgot that there is one more weapon in A tier. The Bloodhounds Fang, everyone's favorite, the sort of people's champ. A lot of people call this more of a quality weapon than a dex weapon, and I can understand why. If I wasn't going to put it in the dex tier list, where would I put it? We don't really do quality tier lists because there's not enough of those types of weapons. So as a pick in general, or as dex, whatever you want to call it, it's obviously awesome. It's really buffable, really high burst, got that iframe jump. This weapon has carried so many people through their first playthroughs, multiple people that I know, and someone that I'm going through with right now. It's just the instant go-to weapon from Limgrave early game. It performs amazing in PvP as well as PvE though, but I don't want to put it S tier because it can be a bit awkward with the slower nature of the Ash of War, the two-part to it, and it's obviously predictable that coming back in. Now it's time for our last two weapons though. Yeah, it's the same two. Firstly, the Nagakiba, which as a katana has got reduced poise this patch, but it doesn't really matter. It's still a phenomenal weapon. It does everything the Uchigatana does, as I've just said. It's incredible. It's viable for so many builds. It's versatile with all the different Ashes of War. You can buff it in so many ways. And this one has better range, so it's straight up better. At the cost of slightly more weight, it's a worthy trade, and I've run this in so many core, strong builds in basically every patch since 1.0. I see it very often as well, for good reason. It's strong as hell. It's an S tier pick. I don't think that's really debatable. Unlike the last weapon, Scavengers curved swords, this curved sword is essentially a double seppuku machine where you can attack super quick. It has the power stance curved sword running attack, which is insane. You're going to find a hard time getting a weapon with fast bleed buildup with a great moveset like this and more medium range compared to the daggers. The downsides is curved sword poise damage was also reduced, and obviously seppuku was nerfed in the ways that it's been. However, that affects everyone, so contextually it remains one of the top tier picks, and you can run it in a variety of ways beyond seppuku. So I still weigh this as a top tier S pick, but maybe not as strong as it once was, obviously. But there you have it, our complete list, which I have slightly reordered, left to right, left being the strongest in each individual tier. Although I will say it's like splitting hairs with decks in both A and B, they're all very competitive with one another in each individual tier. Let me know what you guys think though, would you change anything? Is there anything I've actually forgot to introduce to the tier list this time? I'd say though, it's been a very interesting patch for dex weapons in 1.08. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.